Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and have another one of our recaps, shall we? In case you somehow missed the last episode, this happens every 10 episodes or so. So we just finished episode 20, so we're going to kind of talk about my thoughts of the game, thoughts about what has happened specifically in the last 10 episodes, thoughts for the future, and just, yeah, what all things are bouncing around my head. So, first of all, I do want to go ahead and talk about we've kind of experienced three different realms, although to be fair, we haven't really gotten a very good look at the third realm yet. So let's kind of talk about, what we have seen from the two of them. Um, Calaglia was very much if you think about being a slave, you think of Calaglia. Very, very hard forced labor, guards everywhere, like physical punishment anytime that you, like, step out of line. Um, Very, very, very straightforward. And it felt like Cyslodia was much more of like an Orwellian control system where it was just like Big Brother is watching, turning your allies against you, making it so that you weren't really free to a certain extent. It felt like the slaves of Calaglia were united; they just were powerless. Whereas Cyslodia worked against itself. You can really tell that in that after you beat Calaglia, the big thing that Zephyr was worried about was, don't start like oppressing and beating up the riddens that are still around. Like, we need to be better rulers of this land, or it just becomes an eternal cycle. And whenever we actually finished up with Cyslodia, we kind of got into a like it's we were more worried about how the Danans were going to handle their freedom, going to handle the fact that they had basically been forced to distrust each other for so long that they weren't sure that they would be able to really work together. And it was going to be a hard road to be in a better place, whereas the Calaglians were in a better place, like, immediately. So it's very, very interesting. It very, very, like, turns into different ways of controlling a population and a sort of examination into the after effects of each of those falling. Which, of course, brings us to Elda Manasia. I may be mispronouncing that. I've only heard it like once. But Elda Manasia is interesting in that we haven't really seen anything, but what we have seen seems a very absentee landlord situation, which makes me think one of two things is going on. First of all, we could have a situation where, like, you actually have like a secret society governing the Danans. So the Danans don't even know they're being controlled, don't even know they're being exploited. It could even be a thing where the Rinnans came in and were like, hey, we are going to show you better cultivation techniques in order to make the land better. And they show them that, and then they're secretly just skimming all of this power off the top. But because the Danans don't know that they're doing that, there's no, like, friction going on between them. There's, like, all of their insidiousness is hidden away, so the Danes don't even know they're slaves, which would be interesting. But frankly, what I think would be even more interesting and cooler is if the leaders of Elda Manasia were actually just decent fucking people. What would that do if Shion's, like, whole quest is I have to defeat the five lords? And, that's another question. Actually, did we take their master core? Did we take Ganabel's master core? I don't think we ever saw that we did. But we definitely got our hands on ball sacks. So that's another question, because I always thought that her goal in taking down the Ren Lords was to get all of their master cores together. But if the leader of Elda Menancia is actually a decent person, like not Zephyr's not around anymore. Like, Alphen is not going to be okay with offing him, with fighting against him. So that'll be a really, really interesting like, plot development, is if we get here and then this guy is actually working for the betterment of everyone, is actually like a leader of the people, all of the people, not just exploiting the Danans. So that's kind of what I hope happens in this one, but I expect that there's going to be a little bit of subterfuge and abuse going on, just non-obvious. Like, the last two, it was very, very, very clear that they were oppressing the populace. This seems a lot more, sight unseen going on. Secondly, I do want to go in and talk about it's a very minor scene, and you may have actually forgotten that it happened, but there was a scene where we had, like, this Zergul Hunter that was fighting this massive, 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 like, group, like, it looked like dozens, if not hundreds, of Zygles had just fallen all around him. And we saw him, and he looked at us, and he had this really creepy, weird eye. And then he just, like, ran off. Kind of a nothing that happened on our way to the capital of Cislodia. But I definitely remember it, and it was very. You know that that character is going to come back. They floated the idea of it being a Renan Lord. Um, Obviously, I don't think it was because we ran into the Renan Lord of Cislodia, and you're not going to have like freaking Balsef going into Cislodia and hunting Zygles. Like that's not really going to think they don't travel between the realms that freely. Even they don't. So that does raise the question of who the fuck this guy is. And I've got two ideas. It may be a future party member, or it might be a like bounty hunter esque character that's going to come back for us later. Um, they definitely kind of like floated the idea that this is some sort of like crazy hunter of challenge, almost similar to like what Eisen turned into. Eisen or oh geez, I've blinked on his name, but the samurai guy from Zestiria or Berseria. My gosh, sorry, Eisen got me into Zestiria mindset. But regardless, where it's just like I want to go out and I want to challenge myself. And as we get stronger and stronger and keep taking down lords, that guy may come back and be like, "You are a worthy opponent. Let's fucking go." So if that happens, that will be interesting. I also would like the idea that he is like some sort of like relation to one of the more powerful um rulers, but he's more like, yeah, the Zygles are getting out of control. We need to control this. We need to do something about it. So he's probably made his personal quest to go around and deal with this. He's not actually running a realm, which could lead him to be a more sympathetic character, but this is all just spitball. Moving on. We do go ahead and have a possibility of like the whole Mimic Ganabelt reveal was interesting, but I do have a couple of problems with it that I brought up at the time. But because this is the retrospective, I'm going to kind of bring them up again. Um, the big issue that I have, I shouldn't call it a big issue, but the issue that I have is we have this thing about how the Master Core from Calaglia was reacting to the presence of the Master Core of Cislodia whenever we ran into Minnick when he came in to support us. But then why the fuck didn't it react to like the Master of Cislodia whenever we ran into him in the Silver Sword's hideout? And like I don't have an answer to that because I freaking like Ganabel definitely had it with him. There's no question about that. He had to have it with him. So I don't know why it didn't react. And that seems a bit of a plot point that, we should have known that Minnick was Getabout the whole time. Though possibly it could have reacted and then Shion was just like, I don't know why this is doing this. This is weird. And then Minnick would just not say a fucking word, but it very obviously didn't react until that moment, and it should have. Also, just in general, like the reveal I liked. I talked a lot about how I was annoyed that we basically didn't have any interaction with Balsef until we ran into him and killed him. And at least we had a little bit more with Ganabelt. So there was a bit more of a background to him. Again, I would have liked even more. I would have liked, a bit more interaction with him, a bit more plots that we foiled for him. I will admit it's a bit difficult for them to really like realistically do that. Because at the end of the day, we do run into a situation where, like, he's already in total control, so it's not like we have a lot of plots we can foil, because he already owns everything. But it still feels a little bit, like, plotty to just go through and knock him down. So, well, but you know what? Act 2 is definitely better than Act 1, so we'll go with that. Speaking of Act 2 being better than Act 1, I'm going to contradict myself. I loved Law's whole arc. Like, the whole idea. I actually thought Law had abandonment issues. I thought Zephyr somehow made his way from Cislodia to Calaglia, rather than the other way around of Law ditching Zephyr. But still, the idea of going from my dad's an idiot to my dad's so much smarter than I realized is just, it's something that gets very, very close to home for me, and it was handled extremely well. The frustration of finally realizing who your parent actually is and how close you actually are to them right before you lose them. Like, Law's going to be carrying a chip on his shoulder. It's funny because Law's going to be carrying a chip on his shoulder the entire game. And then, like, Law has, like, whenever you actually are playing the game, it feels like Law is the one that plays that out the least. Like, he's more of a general good guy, whereas Shion's very, very edgy, and she doesn't have a good reason to be, at least not yet. Um, I'm sure she will get a reason to be. Do not you worry about that. But as of right now, she just does not feel like she has the biggest of reasons to be But she's way more about than Law, and Law should be more based on his backstory. But I do really, really appreciate Law as a character. Like, he's probably my favorite character of the piece because he's the one that's the most explored. Which brings me to the fact that Rinwell hasn't really had an arc at all, and that frustrates me. Like, the Silver Swords barely interacted with her, which was a problem. So that was a bit of an oops. And then, like, Xion and Alphen haven't really changed since the beginning of the game, which frustrates me. Like, they had an identifying, okay, here's who they are as people. And then Alphen had a bit of one whenever Zephyr disappeared, and he basically had to ascend to leader of the group and peacekeeper. But they haven't really explored that yet. The characters are a bit static for me. I do hope we get more arcs with really all of them. Although I do think Law's arc was very, very fulfilling. So I won't be, like, crushed if that's all we get from him. So, obviously, I want more with everyone. I'm never satisfied. So, the last... Well, I guess I had written down Hope for Will and Xion for future arcs, and I kind of already covered that. So, I guess that's the end of my retrospective. Well, it's relatively a short retrospective, but I am kind of covering my ideas as I go along, but here's sort of my idea for the game as a whole. Kind of up in the air as to what Xion's ultimate goal is, and I hope that we actually have a decent ruler to challenge that and make us have a better idea of who she is. And yeah, interested to meet our other party members. We may only have 2 left based on that one scene from the introduction. And then 3 more realms, and then probably we'll have to go to Rinna and deal with that. Possibly other stuff as well. Like, I don't think the game is moving as fast as it feels like it is, but it does feel like it's moving fast. And I do have to remember we're 20 episodes in, and there are definitely some of these games that finish up in 60 or so episodes. Though there's also some that, like, cross the 100 episode mark, so who knows? But regardless, I will see you. Thank you for tuning in. It may be a bit before I can get another episode recorded. I am actually traveling for work, so I'll be back next Friday. So hopefully I can record Saturday and Sunday. But until then, arrivederci.